From Paul's letter to Philemon, if you will. There's a storm out on the ocean, and it's coming this way. If your soul's not anchored in Jesus, you will surely drift away. There's a storm out on the ocean, and it's coming this way. If your soul's not anchored in Jesus, you will surely. Woo! That's enough. Paul's letter to Philemon, and it is noted as one of his prison epistles. For Paul pens this letter, one of 4 prison epistles that he writes. It is supposedly said by theologians that it is the parent of the other 3, and it is the brother of Paul's letter that he wrote to Colossians. Onesimus is the one that it is written about. The title of the letter, Philemon, is the topic of discussion that Paul pens this letter to. And what he's referring to is a runaway slave by the name of Onesimus. Onesimus, in those days and times, slaves were bought and sold. And if the slave would run away, he was obligated by anybody who got him to send him back to his master. And the sentence, 90% of the time, was death. Onesimus, who was the runaway slave, not only ran away from his master, but he stole from him before he ran away. He robbed his master and then got away. Now, in the interim of him getting away, he ran into the Apostle Paul. Paul was ministering, and as Paul was ministering, he ran into Onesimus, and Onesimus was convicted in his heart to accept Christ as his personal Savior. Upon accepting Christ as his personal Savior, he began to work with Paul. And upon him working with Paul, got into a conversation with the apostle. And the apostle discovered that Onesimus was a runaway slave. He was obligated by law to return him to his master. But in returning him to his master, he knew what the penalty would be. But in the interim of their conversation, of the apostle talking to Onesimus, he discovers that Philemon, the slave owner, is a personal friend of his and also a brother in the Lord. So he tells Onesimus, I'm going to pen this letter, and I want you to take this letter and put it in the hands of Philemon. And it is said that Paul sent somebody with him. And during the course of his flight from Philemon to Paul, he is convicted by the Lord to accept Christ as his personal Savior. Paul sends a letter carrier with Onesimus and tells him to go with him to confront Philemon. Let Philemon know before his natural anger takes over that now Onesimus is not the Onesimus that left him, but now he is a brother in the Lord. This letter carries so much weight because it addresses not only then, but now. How many of us, even though Philemon was a believer, would have it in our hearts if a brother or sister wrongs us to have mercy and compassion upon them, and would restore them back, not only back to their present state, but then give them a bill of freedom. And say, now no longer will you be a slave, but now you're my brother. I won't get much help on that one, because most of us still are under the law. An eye for an eye. You mess with me, I'm going to mess with you. Jesus transformed all of that when Jesus said you are supposed to pray for those that despitefully use you. We have not reached that level of maturity as of yet. We have learned the basic calisthenic moves of Christendom, because we can dance at the drop of a hat. We can run, we can crawl, we can shout, we can do all of that. But when it comes down to really forgiving and loving, hard for us to deal with. I'll love you, I'll forgive you, but from a distance.